Ladies and gentlemen, for one of the best sports podcasts in the business, subscribe on YouTube to Shaky's Sports Journeys.
Hi and welcome to Shaky's Sports Journeys. I must have said that now like 100 times. Maybe I need to do a new introduction. It's getting a bit the same. Today's guest, who I'm bringing for you today, is an ex-Scotland rugby legend, captain as well. Led Scotland famously to a fantastic Grand Slam victory over England, but we're not going to talk about that too much today. The gentleman on screen who we have with us today has talked about it 1,000 times over. Welcome to the show, David Sole. How are you, sir?
I am very well, thank you, and delighted to be here. So, thank you.
And as ever, my co-host, Mr. Flanners, welcome.
Thanks, Jakey. Looking forward to this one. Obviously, been very close to a couple of these lads at the Grange for a long time. So now I'm looking forward to pick David's brains and get into the depth of a high-performing father. So it'll be interesting to see how we get from it.
So, Mr. Sole, what we want to do is take you back, all the way back. Tell us a little bit about your family background, your upbringing, your childhood, etc. Where you're born and bred.
Well, firstly, please don't call me Mr. Sole, because that reminds me a bit of my dad, you know, and that, I'm old enough without having that reminder. So I was born and brought up in the early part of my life down in Buckinghamshire and Hertfordshire. So my dad worked in the city. My mum comes from Aberdeenshire, and they met at Cambridge after the war, got married after the war, and lived just outside in Hertfordshire. My dad worked in London working in property. So I lived down there until I was about 8 years old. And I brought up by there. But when my grandfather died, my late mother inherited the place up in Aberdeenshire. So we moved lock, stock and barrel as a family up to deepest, darkest Aberdeenshire, and I spent many of my formative years on hills we were just inside the Cairngorm National Park, so it was a stunning place to be. A place called Glenbucket, which is in Strathdon, 40 miles west of Aberdeenshire. Just a stunning place to grow up, and for a young boy who likes the outside life and likes going out, sort of walking and climbing up hills and spending time outside, it was kind of the ideal childhood. So that was where I grew up. I went to school, primary school, sort of locally, a place called Blairmore, which is now closed, sort of halfway between Dufftown and Huntly. And that was, it was sort of, I suppose, not quite Tom Brown's school days, but fairly Spartan existence up there. You know, it was not quite cold showers before breakfast every morning, but you kind of learn, you grew up pretty quickly there. And then from there, I went on to Glenalmond in Perthshire, which was just a beautiful place to go. A very strong reputation for rugby, cricket, all sports really, and very strong academically. So that was where my sort of early education up until I left school and went to university.
Were you always interested in sport?
Yeah, I love sport. I mean, I enjoy playing it. The very first primary school I went to was a place called Beechwood, and we used to have little red blazers, and we used to turn them inside out at break time to go and play football, and pretended we were Arsenal because it had the sort of red silk with the white sleeves, so it looked like an Arsenal top if you turned it inside out. So Arsenal was, I suppose, my very first football team. And I was introduced to rugby there, I guess, as a sort of 6 or 7 year old, but it was very sort of elementary stuff. But it was very much in my family's sort of upbringing. When the Five Nations was on, my mum and dad would sort of throw a party, and they'd have black velvet and gather around the telly, and I'd watch for a bit and get bored, and then go out and sort of play with my own rugby ball outside. So that was very much part of it. And my dad was very sporty. He won a couple of blues at Cambridge for hockey. He didn't play rugby, having got a back injury as an 18-year-old, and then served in the Second World War and had a few encounters with the opposition, which meant that sort of preempted him from playing any sort of meaningful physical sport after that. But he played hockey, got a couple of blues for Cambridge at hockey. So yeah, sport was always part of our life. And my dad was a keen cricketer as well. Played for a club in Hampshire called the Trojans, and he always said that it was very much, when the Second World War broke out, the rugby club and the cricket club and the hockey club just joined up. That was what they did. So they sort of joined up en masse into the Hampshire Regiment, and that's where he served for 6 years, and from 39 to 45.
Fascinating that. And David, was it a sense of the rugby at Glenalmond? Of course, you get an opportunity, don't you? And it's forced upon you. I take it that it sort of gets serious for you. Was it still at school, or was it after school?
Well, I always took it fairly seriously. I'm quite a competitive person. So, and in those days, rugby was your winter sports, hockey was your spring sport, and then cricket was your summer sport. So, I loved all three, and it was great to participate in all three. At Blair Moor, the prep school that I went to, they in their history they'd had one undefeated team, and I actually played in the second undefeated team. And it was funny because all the team photos were up, and there was this one photo in colour. And they, splashed out to have the first 15 in colour because they'd been undefeated. And so when I was lucky enough to play in a team that went undefeated in the season, we had our photo taken in colour. So that was a really sort of proud moment for me. Yeah. And then, Glenalmond, obviously winter sport was rugby. They played a little bit in the spring term, and then obviously cricket in the summer, which was great. It was fantastic for me because I loved rugby. It was very much my first sport, and so it was great to have two terms, or at least 1.5 term of rugby, which was fantastic. And they took it fairly seriously there. They had some guys. David Leslie went there. John Frame, former Scottish international, in the sort of 60s, was another sort of international from Glenalmond. So you had these people who played international rugby for Scotland at your school, and it was quite a big thing. David Leslie used to come back and play in the old boys game from time to time. So when you were allowed to have old boys matches, so that was a big thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned university, so straight out of school, straight into uni. Where did you go to uni? What did you study?
Well, I took a year off. I had great aspirations to go to Cambridge and hopefully follow in my father's footsteps and get a blue for rugby there. But the year I applied to do the rugby players course at the Rugby Players College. I wanted to do land economy at Magdalen College at Cambridge. And the year I applied, they actually changed the admissions tutor because they were concerned that the college was getting a reputation of being the sportsman's college. So, it's very strong on cricket, rugby. Anyone who played sport went to Magdalen to do land economy, and it was kind of the rugby player's degree. So the year that I applied, they changed the admissions tutor because they wanted to change the reputation and kind of upgrade the academic aspect of the college, which was a bit of a blow because I was banking on my rugby to get me in rather than my intellect. And so I didn't get in. But I took the year off, and I spent some time at a school in Canada in the summer at St Andrew's College, Aurora, doing some part-time teaching work there, which was fantastic. And I guess one of my claims to fame, which people don't know about, is that I taught Kiefer Sutherland how to play rugby, which clearly stood him in very great stead, because he pursued that career, with great alacrity afterwards. But he was one of the pupils there, and I taught him as a sort of 13, 14-year-old to play rugby.
That's fascinating.
Did you always know that there was a chance you could go on to play rugby at the top level? Was that your dream, and was that something that you could see coming through as a teenager?
Well, I guess the sort of first representative honours you had were playing for Scottish schoolboys, and you know, from time to time you get one of the guys from the Glenalmond first 15 would get picked, and that was, you know, that was a big thing. And there was a trial process where you had the sort of Scottish Wayfarers, which was the public schools, so it was Glenalmond, Merchiston, Loreto, the Academy, Strathallan, these sorts of schools came together to form a team. And if you then play one of the districts, you play Edinburgh or the South or North Midlands, whoever it was, and that would be kind of a trial process. Then you get into the Scottish schools trials and play games there. And I played for the Scottish Wayfarers a couple of times, and you kind of thought that, you know, you're getting there. And then in my last year, I sort of progressed to the Scottish schools trial, and then got picked for the Scottish schools, and that was fantastic. And we had, you know, a very good side. We had Gavin Hastings was a contemporary of mine. When we played the French, they had Philippe Sella and Eric Champ, who went on to play for France. Stuart Barnes played for the Welsh schoolboys. So there were a lot of guys who went on from that sort of schoolboy setup, and so that was the first taste of international rugby. But then, you know, I went to, having failed to get into Cambridge, I went to Exeter University, and I chose the university purely on the basis that it had a very strong reputation for sport. It had merged with St Luke's College in 1978, and I applied in sort of 81 to go. So the university had inherited the St Luke's fixture list, which was great. So we played the likes of Bristol, Bath, South Wales Police, various other first-class sides at the time, and so that was a really sort of big step up. But the transition from schoolboy rugby into club rugby was very significant, and you kind of thought, wow, this is a bit of a challenge. But then some of the guys from the university side started getting representative honours, either playing for England under 23s or playing for Devon and Cornwall, and you know, you then started getting noticing there, and I suppose, while I still harboured really strong ambitions to go as far as I possibly could in rugby, and I started getting selected for the Anglo-Scots at that point, playing in the district championship, which led to Scotland B caps. You kind of start thinking that you know, you might be on a pathway to winning a cap, which was, you know, fantastic. It would be a dream come true, because, you know, that for a young rugby player who's, yeah, I guess, trying to pursue that as a sort of principal pathway in life, that was what you aspired to. So I guess all of my choices in my early 20s were based around progressing in my rugby career. So my choice of university, the job that I went to after university, it was based around either going to Bristol or Bath to play rugby for Bristol or Bath. And in those days, you were an amateur. So it was whoever could find you the right sort of job and give you the right sort of opportunity to earn a bit of money while playing for Bristol and Bath. And Bath were, you know, very good. I got a nice little job there. And that's what took me to Bath. And, you know, that was then another progression up the ladder, breaking into the first team there. And we had a number of sort of England internationals there. And you know, so it's hard to say when you actually realize that you might be good enough. You just sort of keep working at it, keep training, keep doing the kind of the extras, in the hope that, you know, you might get recognized and perhaps make that transition. And then in 1986, I had a pretty good trial, and they made a number of changes from a side that had won the Wooden Spoon the year previously. We've got 6 new caps against the French, including the Hastings brothers. And I was lucky enough to be one of the other guys to pick up my first cap in that match.
David, can I ask a question? It's something that relate later to your children, and that is, how was your dad? How did he influence you during that period between, you know, 18 to when you got that first cap? What was he like then? And I suppose your mum as well.
Well, they were enormously proud of what I was doing, and yeah, incredibly supportive. You know, they were happy to support me in whatever choices I made. And I suppose, you know, from time to time they would offer advice, but my dad was, you know, I guess rugby wasn't his sport, so while he could sort of say well played or whatever, he perhaps didn't have the same sort of insights as, you know, if that had been his chosen sport.
Yeah.
But you know, they both supported me enormously. They used to come and watch my games, and you know, that was always fantastic to have your family member on the touchline, and clearly you wanted to do well in front of them. And you know, they absolutely supported me in all the sort of choices. And as I say, my career choices weren't particularly focused on work at that point. They were much more focused on sports. So, you know, it was great to have my folks support me in that way.
Yeah.
So fast forward, that was a stage where you weren't quite sure if you were going to make the transition to international level. You've got over that. You've got in. You've got your cap. You went on to play 44 times for your country. I believe that's correct. You captained your country. You scored 12 points. And you also had 3 appearances for the British Lions. Do you remember those 12 points?
You know, I can only remember 8.
Was there a drop goal in there by any chance?
Was there?
Was there any drop kicks in there by any chance?
No, there's certainly no danger of that.
Bundled over the line, surely, over the 5-year line.
No, I remember. Oh no, actually no. I beg your pardon. I do remember it because yeah. So there was one try against Romania, one try against the All Blacks on our tour in 1990, and actually the last 12 points is again a sort of slightly quirky question for sports quiz nerds, because it was the last ever 4-point try in international rugby. And I scored it from about that far, plopping over the line against Australia in 1992 in Brisbane in the final test. And because it was the last international match of the sort of 91-92 season, and the scoring system changed at the start of the 92-93 season.
That's before my time, because I've only noticed 5 points for a try.
Well, there we go, Flanners. You know, so if anyone asks you, or if you want to win money, you can say who scored the last ever 4-point try in international rugby.
I like that. And I suppose Kaz was going to ask a question. And looking back on your career, David, I take it you're very proud of what you achieved in your playing days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you know, we all did it for fun. It was all recreational, and it was our opportunity to release it. And I feel incredibly privileged to have, you know, been around an amazing bunch of guys in the time that I played. You know, people like Finlay Calder, the Hastings brothers, Sean Maneen, Gary Armstrong. You know, all of these guys are, you know, great characters, great men, great human beings. And great friends, and you know, it's absolutely fantastic to have spent time, to have been on tour, to, you know, have had incredible highs, but also incredible lows, because I think it's all about the balance. And I think when you take that into a Lions tour as well, that's just another dimension. And you know, the kind of Lions tour friendships are fantastic, and even, you know, playing against your opponents. I mean, the worst game in the world, I think probably in any sport that has a World Cup, is the 3rd, 4th playoff. Mm-hmm. You know, no one wants to be there. And we obviously got to the 3rd, 4th playoff in 1991 in the World Cup, and had to play the All Blacks down in Cardiff. And playing the All Blacks at any time is a challenge, but, you know, playing in the 3rd, 4th playoff when no one wants to be there is just horrible. But you know, we played and we lost. We got beaten. I think it was 13-9 or something like that. But we didn't play particularly well. But I think probably because we were both there, nursing our sort of the loss in the semi-final a bit, we had the most incredible party that night after the game. And we sort of sat down with the All Blacks in the hotel in Cardiff, and just started playing drinking games and chatting and singing, and they'd bring a guitar out, sing a song, we'd sing a song. It was just an incredible night. And I was commentating on the 2007 Rugby World Cup, and was in Paris doing a piece of work for the kind of the world feed. And I bumped into Grant Fox and Alan Wetton, who'd been in that All Black side, and because they were doing commentary for TV New Zealand or whoever it was. And we were sort of walking out and said, "Do you fancy a beer?" So we went into the bar in Stade de France or Parc des Princes, wherever it was, and started chatting. And said, "Do you remember that third, fourth playoff?" He said, "Oh yeah, hated it." He said, "But mate, what a party we had!" And it was the same for them. It was just an incredible party. And there was another occasion I was invited to play for the French Barbarians against the All Blacks in Agen, and the evening ended with me on a table singing Flower of Scotland, Pierre Berbizier, who's the captain, on a table singing the Marseillaise, and Sean Fitzpatrick on another table doing a haka. and kind of this was 4 o'clock in the morning.
David, this is really interesting because I was going to come to a question regarding one of your boys, and that's Chris. Now, Chris has been known to straight arm Scottish Cup drinks, and he's definitely a character on a night out with the lads. I was wondering, where does that come from? Now I know it is his dad.
I couldn't possibly comment, Flanners, but we all have the same middle name. So my full name's David Michael Barclay Sole, and Chris is Chris Barclay Sole. Tom's Tom Barclay Sole. Yeah. And Barclay is known to be our alter egos. Who tends to come out to play after 1 or 2 drinks, So, if Barclay's been out, it's been a good night.
He's definitely been out there, so that's what it was. One and Kaz, you're probably going to ask, but David, how do you see rugby now, and how it was in your day, from I suppose a playing day and a social aspect? What was it like now, do you reckon, compared to what it was then?
Yeah, I mean, the game is chalk and cheese to the game that we played. It is so much more physical. The guys are, incredible athletes. They are, incredible physical specimens, faster, stronger, more powerful, more skillful. Well, I think we had some incredibly skillful players as well, but, they've got the time to work on all of these things. And, it is a very different game. The laws have changed massively since I played, and it's funny when you look back, if you become attuned to the modern game, and then you go back to a game from the 80s or early 90s, it is a very different game to watch. There are a lot more mistakes, but there's a lot more continuity. There's a lot more end-to-end rugby. For me, the game today is a little bit more static, a little bit more dull at times, a little bit more defense orientated, compared to what it was like in the kind of 80s and 90s. But make no mistake, there were some pretty dull matches that I played in, which I'd rather not remember. But the majority of them were pretty good fun.
Yeah.
It's hard to answer the social. Sorry, guys. It's hard to answer the social question because I've never been out with these guys, but I know we had a bloody good time.
I'd imagine from getting to know a couple of them in recent times, I wouldn't imagine it's much different by the sounds of things. I think it comes with the rugby. The rugby like to play hard and enjoy a party as well. Retirement is a big question. I want to ask of you. You're so used to playing all those years. It's that you mentioned you're very competitive. What was it like to finally hang up the boots, and how did you deal with it?
Well, I made a sort of personal promise to myself that I would carry on playing so long as I was still enjoying it. And because, as I said, it was what we did for fun. It was it was a recreational thing for us, and it was more as much about the kind of crack afterwards as the game itself. And so that's what I did. And in the kind of 91-92 season, it just was a really long season because we started. For us, June, July doing pre-season because we had an international match against Romania as a warm-up for the World Cup. We had a game against the Barbarians, I think, as well in August, which is really early in rugby terms to be playing internationals. Then we went straight into a World Cup, and we did well. We got to the semi-finals, that sort of took us through to, I don't know, November time. And then I was, tired by that stage, because we'd come off a tough season in '91, not much of a summer break. And then we obviously had the Five Nations, as it was then, to prepare for '92. And I remember going off on a skiing holiday rather than playing in the trial for a week, because I just needed a break. And I went out with my wife and Sean Lenine and his wife. And I got a huge amount of stick in some of the papers for, just spearing off like that. And I thought, if that's the sort of stick you're going to get, is it worth carrying on? And I sort of was asking myself, am I really still enjoying this? And we had a tour to Australia at the end, which was not a tour from hell, but I don't think anyone at the SIU had looked at a map when they agreed the itinerary, because we started off in Darwin in the Northern Territories, then played a midweek game in Brisbane in Queensland, then travelled to Tasmania in Hobart for the next Saturday or midweek game or whenever it was. So we'd gone from 35 degrees and 95% humidity to -2 and freezing in the space of 6 days, and people wondered why we were all getting unwell and getting colds and stuff like that, and not feeling at our best. And of course, you've then got the incredible distance. So, and as I say, I thought about that and thought, do I really want to carry on? And so I decided I wasn't enjoying it as much as I wanted to. And I was thinking, trying to build a career at that point with United Distillers, and had 2 young children, and thought, well, actually, trying to balance everything is just getting too much. So I decided to call it quits.
What age were you? What age were you then?
I was 30. Yeah, I was 30, and I guess there was a Lions tour coming up to New Zealand the following year, which I suppose as captain of one of the home nations side, there's a possibility that you might get the shout to captain that. But I decided that if I stayed on just for the Lions tour to try and be part of that, I'd be doing it for all the wrong reasons. I'd be doing it for reasons of ego and profile and stuff like that. And that's really not who I am or why I played the game. And so I was content just to call it quits and start focusing on other things. And I don't regret it at all. I absolutely love my time in the game, but that was, as I said, it's not the kind of registration, it's the mileage that counts. And I've done 7 years of international rugby, and that felt like quite a lot. And there were other priorities to focus on.
You mentioned a couple of priorities there, and that was 2 young children, and that's something I want to touch on now. You've obviously got 4 children who have performed at a very high level, and I've been lucky enough to play with some of them, and I've met all of them. In terms of, is it in the genes? Was it meant to be? Is it the way that you looked after them? Did you make them lead a high performance life, or was that just always going to happen because their dad played at that level?
Well, I don't think they necessarily had any appreciation of what I achieved, because obviously they were
young,
most born after it happened. Even the ones that were born when I was still playing, they were too young to understand it. So I don't think they necessarily had a sense of that, or in terms of following in Dad's footsteps or anything. Sport's always been a really important part of our life, and we think because of what it gives you as a human being, as a teammate, as a leader, the kind of the values that you get from any sport around sort of discipline, training, all of these sorts of good things are good things to have. And it's, I've always been a real believer in getting sort of balance in life and just trying things out. So we really encouraged our kids to try everything. James' brother was a good county cricketer. He was on the books at Gloucester for a while. And I suppose if you think about genes, and the kids are more likely to get genes, their cricketing genes from James' side of the family than my side of the family. having said that, I did get a trial as under 19 for Scotland, but was never gonna progress. I know my limitations. But I love sport. I love cricket. I love all sports really.
Yeah.
And I guess what we did was just encourage them to try everything. So, Chris won a prize for ballet when he was at his primary school, and he was a terrific gymnast. In his sort of early days, all the kids had to go at judo. They enjoyed athletics. They were lucky enough to go to schools where the kind of breadth of the sporting curriculum was enable them to have a go at pretty much most things.
Yeah.
And that was all we wanted them to do. And to be perfectly honest, it didn't bother me that whether they were good, bad, indifferent, or whether they loved it or hated it or whatever. We encouraged them to try it out. And if they did find something which they were passionate about, then absolutely we'd support them as much as we possibly could to do whatever they wanted to do in that particular area.
So,
The boys, when we were chatting to them, completely echo what you say there. Because I was curious to know, your dad's was a rugby legend. Did he want you to follow in those footsteps? And the boys said, not at all. He was just happy for us to when cricket direction started taking shape. Dad was happy. Now this has led to having, when Flanner's mentioned it already, pretty talented kids. Two of the boys have gone on current internationalists for Scotland, as well as have had stints down in county cricket as well. Your daughter is a fantastic netball player who has travelled the world playing the game as well. And it all came nicely and formed at the lovely Sunny Grange a couple of years ago, where you were the guest of honour, rightfully so, which I thought was great. And inspiration for the boys. That there's a man here that's been there and done it and gotten over the line against the English. What were you feeling on the morning of the game? One of your boys was playing. The atmosphere, everything. Talk to me about the day from a father's perspective.
It's just an amazing day. I've done a piece with Sky with Chris and Tom the week previously, which they were going to use in the sort of halftime break. And they said, "How are you going to feel?" And I was just, I was absolutely delighted that the sun was shining. That was the main thing, and the game was going to take place. And I said in the Sky interview, all I wanted Chris to do, and indeed the rest of the guys is to enjoy the occasion, because you play sport for fun. That you play for enjoyment, I think, fundamentally. And of course it's important, and winning's important, and but all of those are sort of incidental. Sport is about recreation. It's about bringing guys together and creating that sense of excitement. And when you play a big game like that in front of, at the Grange, whatever it was, 5,000 or 6,000 people for Scottish cricketers, or for me at Murrayfield, I really want to enjoy the moment. And so I really encourage them to revel in the moment and to just enjoy every second of it. And it's a bit like Tom when he made his list day debut against South Africa playing for Northants. What a great occasion. And we went up to see him. But same thing, just as I said, good luck and just enjoy it, have fun. Play with a smile on your face, because whether you win or lose, it's just a great occasion. And that's what your kind of memories are made of. And I remember my very first cap I shared with one of the most incredible scrum halves that Scotland's ever produced, Roy Laidlaw, who had been there, done it, got a Grand Slam under his belt, got Lions tours under his belt, and it was my first cap. And Roy, we shared the room together, and we sort of met on Thursday. So he was trying to wind me up. He said, he said, 48 hours to go till kickoff. You're nervous yet? I said, no, I'm not. And I got this sort of countdown, 24 hours to go. You're nervous. And the fact that I was so laid back about the whole thing and just prepared to enjoy the moment and try and remember everything about the experience, from the moment you get on the bus, you get the police escort to the ground, you get in, you get your jersey, all of those. I just wanted to treasure those moments because you never know if you're going to get another opportunity like that. And I think it wound up Roy immensely because he got far more nervous than I was. But it was the same for the kids. I just wanted them, for Chris in that particular instance, to enjoy the occasion. And then it was just absolutely fantastic. And I always say that I never really appreciated how my mum and dad must have felt watching me play rugby, and win big matches for Scotland. But that day, and indeed any time I've watched my kids play, whether they won or lost, I get a real sense of how they must have felt because you just want to burst with pride. It's just fantastic. You're just so proud and happy for them. And I always say, if you offered me the choice to win a Grand Slam or to watch my kids play sport for Scotland, I'd take my kids every single time. I'd give up all of my Lions tours, Grand Slams, everything to watch the boys play or watch Gemma play.
And that's something that rings true for me there is, and Chris mentioned it as well, is you've given all your kids the platform to enjoy it and really be a part of multiple sports. And I think for other parents watching this as well, it's quite a big thing, isn't it? Because I think you hear about stories about people pushing their children and being down on a Sunday on the pitch at the football and shouting and swearing and the pressure. Because I remember you talking about your debut there. I remember my debut, all I could think about was, bloody hell, I need to try and perform here to make someone happy or keep someone happy or impress them. So, by the sounds of it, your kids has had the chance to, well, actually, I'm going to go enjoy this for myself, which is a big lesson, I think, for a lot of parents to take away as well.
Yeah, I think it's one, as you probably heard from Chris and Tom, we love watching, as a family, we love watching each other. And whether it's Gemma at the Commonwealth Games or the boys playing cricket, even if it's just the club match, if we're around, we'll go and watch. We'll go and watch Jamie play Fred and Rackies or whatever it is, because that's what we do. And I guess that is what we've always done as a family. If we're there and one of the kids is playing, we'll go and watch. Because I think it's really important to be there and to be supportive. And rugby is interesting because my wife isn't as au fait with the laws of the game as perhaps I am. And she's quite vociferous from time to time, or certainly was when she was watching the kids at school play sport. And she has had a game stopped because she was abusing the referee so much. Not her proudest moment, but she was absolutely right, by the way, because the referee was hopelessly incompetent to the point of being, putting the kids at risk for serious harm. But there we go.
The boy, your two sons, your daughter as well.
Jamie's a good rugby player as well.
Yeah, he was, I guess, feeling a little bit left out as being the only sibling who hadn't had a Scotland cap. But we're absolutely thrilled because this year, or last year, whenever it was, he was selected for the Scottish club side to play against Ireland. So he finally got to wear the thistle. So all the kids have done it now. And he's very funny about that because, oh God, I was really feeling the pressure. Everyone else has got caps and I haven't. So, and he's getting on a bit. He's sort of 30 plus now. So we were absolutely thrilled when he got the call up for that game.
The kids are all blessed with the fact, obviously, that they've got a father who's played sport at the top level. Do they tap into your psyche, your mindset? We all face playing sport at the top level. Like you said, it's not all hunky-dory. There's moments where it's really, really tough. Do they speak to dad about that kind of stuff?
Especially
Tom now, obviously, going through his action change. It'd be some dark times. David, how has that been for him? Is he tapped into you, like I said?
Yeah, I mean, he's found it tough, and I think when I listened to Chris and Tom on the podcast, they were both talking about the pressures that you get in county cricket and the pressure that you towards the end of the season you're playing for your contract, you're playing for the next deal.
Brutal.
And yeah, it is tough. And Tom, we're really proud that he did 5 years down at Northants. And and I think did really well. We were obviously disappointed for him when he got released, but I think that's absolutely fine. And there was, that's the choice. Again, it comes back to, I think you have to be available to support, and we try and strike a balance between asking how you're doing and questioning what you're doing. Have you done a bit? Have you spoken to Crowe in terms of your action, or do you want to do? And on the one hand, you don't want to be too intrusive, but because you're a mum or a dad, you want to make sure that he's okay and kind of mentally he's okay. And he's had some ups and downs. There's no doubt about that, and I'm sure he would admit that himself. And I think the fact that he does admit that himself is a real strength of his, because he's good at asking for help when he needs it. And I think that's quite a brave thing and courageous thing to have to do. So we're always there to be supportive. We've recently moved into a new house, and there's a very large agricultural shed. So we've set up an area for him to bowl in the shed, and he's taken himself out, and I take my hat off him. He's filming himself. He's working on his action. He knows the things he's got to do, and I think it's the pandemic for him couldn't have come at a worse time, because he's just not been able to do all the corrective work in a sort of concentrated period, do the test and get back to bowling. But he's a pretty resilient lad, and he's a pretty determined lad. I think when we were sort of growing up, or when they were growing up, you looked at his competitiveness, and he took it pretty seriously. He is a very competitive young man, and to the point of it being dialing up a little bit too much. We had one or two fallings out about that. When he was out and they playing cricket in the garden and the bats would go or whatever. Hold on a minute, Tom. You've got to deal with failure as well as success.
No, but it is a real strength of character. Something like having to remodel your bowling action is not an easy thing to do, and with the fact that you've been released, that could a lot of people would walk away from the game or couldn't deal with it, the fact that they have to deal with this challenge that's been presented, and that's the cards he's been dealt. And I follow him on Instagram, and I see his videos, seen the shed, great facility that he's got there, and he's working hard to sort it out, and it's a great role model for anybody out there that deals with adversity. That you just have to you stay strong, and you can come through it. But I think it certainly helps that he's got a very supportive unit around him. You as his father, I'm sure you would have seen moments in your career as well where you're thinking, oh, I'm not playing the best right now.
Yeah, and I think for me it comes down to his work ethic, and I think he's got a terrific work ethic in that regard. So he's not work shy at all. He works hard on his fitness. He works hard on his on kind of the technical aspect of things. And I think the discipline of the professional game gives you that when you work in that environment. I think, and you perhaps move away from that. I was always a good trainer. I always enjoyed training. I liked going to the weights room or doing extra hill runs or whatever it was, because you kind of wonder whether others are doing it, and if you think that's going to give you a little bit of a competitive advantage, then psychologically that's a big plus. And so I think for Tom and the others to sort of be prepared to go out and go running when it's pissing with rain and blowing a gale, I think I take my hat off to them.
It's one question, sorry, the one question I'd like to ask, and it's to relate now to your professional life and how you see that crossing over with sport as well. And one thing that has been ringing in my head is, I'm going down the route, that route of being in the professional working life now. And what would you say is the three sort of key indicators for high performance, and how do you see it now when you teach, young directors and aspiring people? From what you've learned as a sportsman, what would you say is the key to high performance within business and sport? Because I think there's going to be a lot of parents watching this, and there'll be a lot of business people watching this as well. So, that's what you do now. what would your advice on that front be?
Yeah, it's a hard question to ask, because I think, you know, very often context is everything, and you know, to sort of be as generic and general is you know, and meaningful is, it can be tough. You know, I think, you know, the aspects of leadership are really key, and I think what sport does is it gives you a huge amount of discipline around that, and you know, if I think about my game, rugby, you know, the sort of discipline around leadership, you know, bringing a team together, getting a sense of common purpose, common goal, common vision, you know, and trying to get everyone to get some momentum behind that is really important. So and at the heart of that, you've got to build trust. You know, you've got to have a high degree of trust, and you know, I think I was, and hopefully I'm, quite a consensual leader. I like collaboration. I like people to come to a consensus and everyone agree. But I'm not afraid of disagreement. You know, I think it's important to have disagreements and diversity of thought. And if you're going to have that, you've got to have a high level of trust, because you've got to recognize that, you know, when you're disagreeing with someone vociferously, it's not a personal attack. It's because you all want to do the best thing, whether it's for the sporting team or for the business. You want both to perform at their best, and so that is a really important bit. So I think, you know, building trust in teams, organizations is really important. I think that clarity of purpose, that North Star, you know, why are you here? Why are you here? Everyone can develop a great strategy. You can think about the values, how you're going to do stuff, but you know, purpose-led businesses are really very much the ones which I like to work with and associate the most with. And I think, you know, when I think about my own business, you know, we talked a lot about what is our purpose, and you know, why do we do what we do, and you know, when you can land on that, everything else falls in behind it, and the strategy and the kind of the execution becomes, you know, relatively easy. So purpose one, trust would be another. And I think the other piece that is really important is that bit around diversity. You know, actually recognizing, valuing, appreciating diversity, and most importantly, including that diversity of thought, diversity of approach, diversity of you know, style, individual thinking style, whatever, and bring that all together to sort of build in behind that purpose, that mission.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because teams, it's trust, isn't it? It doesn't matter if it's a sports team or a working environment. And even looking back to Tom there, you know, he feels confident and open up and asking for help and support. And I'm sure you've had disagreements along the way, and that takes a lot of, I suppose that's the support mechanism around him and the environment that he's in. And I think you can create that in business and in sporting environments. So no, that's quite fascinating. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
David, it's been fascinating to chat to you. Learned a lot in the space of this hour. You've really got me thinking about quite a few things, and the way you put things in perspective. You know, the experience you've had in life, now in business, being a father. What's the final bit of advice you would give to parents out there with kids aspiring to play at elite level sport?
Well, as I say, I think if you have a passion about your sport as a parent, don't make an assumption that it's going to be the same for your kids. You know, I'd really encourage parents to allow their kids to experience as many different sports as they possibly can, and then if they land on something that they really enjoy, be as supportive as you possibly can, and that can be as simple as turning up or ferrying them to training, or you know, turning up to support them at a swimming gala or a gymnastic thing, or ballet, exactly, whatever it is, to providing them with sort of financial resource or financial support or whatever it is to become the next freestyle skier for Team GB or whatever it is. So because you only get one crack at it. You only get one crack at it, and I guess I've never worried too much about what kids will do professionally from a career-wise when they get to sort of 30 or 35, because I do trust that the values and behaviors and attributes that they will get through sport will help and support them find their way at some point in the future. And that's really important. So to give them that opportunity, because I say you only get one crack at life, so you might as well make the most of it while you're there. Follow your passion.
What a pleasure it's been. It's been lovely to chat to you. Appreciate you giving us your time. I know you're a busy man, and wish you all the very best in the future.
Thank you very much, guys, and Flan, it's good to see you. We'll
Cheers.
see you again soon.
See you soon. Cheers, David. Thank you.
Take care.